Loving and serving the people did not come with retirement plans or financial security. So, now it's our time to honor their legacy and ensure that they are cared for with the dignity they deserve. You can help by attending and supporting A Night with the Panthers, Saturday, February 22nd, 6:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the Project 43 Team Post Center, 6841 Crenshaw Boulevard, Los Angeles. For more information, contact blackpantherpartybreakfast@gmail.com or call 707-554-2784. That's Black Panther Party Breakfast @gmail.com or call 707-554-2784. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
And you better talk to me nicely. Next to blow lip, that might be. Oh, can't forget all the days they overpriced me. So now that we up, don't get advice, we know. Talk to me nicely. I noticed they hit it, we getting icy. Whoa, can't forget all the moments they overpriced me. So now that we up, don't get advice, we know. We on top, flipping the bird, they going sick. But I'ma make them eat every word, so don't trip. Yeah, even with all the bridges they burn, I won't switch. Even with all this water we drippin', we won't slip. Yeah, Blast Bear Bond in the building, he don't miss. But we call it success when your circle is all rich. If you a big stepper, don't trip over small. I call it how I see it, but never gon' call it quits. I won't, yeah, I won't. But what do I hold it? I don't even know. I think that we finally made it, it gotta be so. The way they be pocket watching, they gotta be bro. Not even my partner's partner, but calling me bro.
KBLA Talk 1580, you better talk to me nicely on a Talking Point Tuesday. I'm excited because my friend and colleague is in the studio. I can say he's one of my very small number of Republican friends. Not because I'm prejudiced, just happens to be that way. He's a national leader for Braver Angels, a former nominee for Congress, former vice chairman of the Republican Party of LA County. He's also a musical artist, a writer, and a speaker on subjects including racial and political reconciliation. What a time for that. He's a KBLA host as well. John Wood Jr., welcome back.
Dominique, it's good to be on with you this morning, and always a pleasure, of course, to speak to the KBLA fam. Thanks for giving me a reason to get up early.
Look, morning. I feel like so much has happened, and because it hasn't been that long since you were in.
Yeah, I guess not.
And I feel like it feels like at least a year worth of political stuff has happened.
Yeah, it feels like about 5 years.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Different.
Yeah.
But then again, every month feels like about 5 years in politics.
Yeah,
these days.
Lately, but you are a Republican, a black Republican. In a lot of, speaking of talking points, a lot of the things that you say to me, I'm like, okay, Republican talking point, check. But unlike
count the eye roll.
Check, eye roll. I know. Let me try to stop. It's automatic. They just automatically roll.
That's okay.
But you actually read, and you're very fact based. That's why I said. That it's kind of, you're a scary Republican because it's hard for me to understand how an intelligent black man who reads, has a black wife, black kids, can believe those, can go along with those lines of reasoning. I mean, it's easier for me to understand someone who's just spouting a bunch of lies, but you generally do not do that. So
well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much. A little bit of a backhanded compliment, but I'll take it. But I'm flattered.
Yeah,
anyway.
backhanded at the party, anyway. Not at you.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's all love with me and Dominique. But no, I mean, honestly, and I don't say this flippantly. I mean, reading has something to do with it. I mean, there is a long history of not just black republicanism in American culture, but black conservatism. And of course, and I think you and I have talked about this over the years, but it does take on, or at least it often and certainly historically takes on a bit of a different context within the black experience. I mean, I am prone to saying that in reality, although you don't always see this diversity reflected in the black sort of Republican constituency that you see maybe highlighted on Fox News or what have you. There have always been different kinds of black Republicans and certainly different kinds of black conservatives. And I sort of delineate them by saying that on the one hand, you do have black Republicans who are sort of Republicans who happen to be black, right? And so, and that's not a judgment or a criticism. It's just to say that, these are oftentimes people who happen to be black who, agree with the idea of lower taxes and lower regulations. And I am often sympathetic to those positions myself, but their republicanism is less about conserving anything particular to the black culture and the black interest and more about just sort of a generic falling in line with sort of however it is the GOP is defining conservatism at the moment, even if it contradicts something that the GOP said yesterday. But then there's a tradition of black conservatism, which is really about preserving the black community. And maybe it's about preserving the economic liberties and foundations inherent in the black community. Maybe it's about conserving a traditional relationship to, say, the institutions of the church in the black community and sort of a nuclear family structure that also is available to a communal fabric, right, that interacts with the male and female sort of role in the household. And so there's a great deal of traditionalism in black history. There's a great deal of conservatism in black history and in the black community, but exists in a context which recognizes that the fact that the black community is defined in large part by its innate and necessary opposition to the forces of white supremacy in history and systematic inequality in the present moment. And so these are black conservatives that you generally find in communities. These are people who you generally find sort of not necessarily highlighted, I think, on the front page of whatever GOP or sort of conservative website, but they are people who exist in reality.
Well, generally, I mean,
tradition.
my experience, my personal experience with those kind of traditional black Republicans that you're talking about, or black conservatives who might not even be Republicans, they might be Democrats.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that it's more of a social conservatism and less of this, the defunding of our schools, the defunding of the social safety net, the sort of aggressive kind of agenda that we're seeing right now, which seems to be targeting not just anti-black policies, but also anti-working class policies. That is less of what I expect from a black conservative. I expect, like you said, sort of pro-church positions, in some cases, what they perceive to be pro-nuclear family, which can at times be anti-LGBTQ+, those kinds of sort of traditional, I guess, positions is more what I expect.
Yeah, I mean, there's an overlap and there's a spectrum, as with all things. I mean, one thing you're, I'm sure, familiar with is that, I mean, there's all sorts of polling to show that a majority, relatively small majority, but a real majority of black voters in general tend to be in favor of a thing like school choice, right? You do have a black capitalist tradition.
I don't actually, I think that's tricky, though. When you talk about school choice, which is kind of like pro-choice, it's one of those BS kind of labels that Republicans are so brilliant at, naming a thing the opposite of what it really is. When people really understand what is masquerading itself under the name of school choice, they don't support it. They support an idea that you can choose whatever school you want.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but when you unmask what Republicans mean when they say school choice, most black people do not support that, actually. The defunding of public schools, subsidizing the rich so they can strip money away from actual public educational institutions. Yeah. The funding of religious institutions at the expense of taxpayer dollars, taking away that tax base and support from the public schools where most black children are going to go. Yeah. When you make it known what it really does, bankrupting state and city budgets, most black people aren't for that.
Yeah, I mean, all issues are more complicated when you start to break them apart in their detail. And, I mean, you can make similar sorts of arguments for the idea of a thing like Medicare for all. The devil is in the details. If you're going to go with the single-payer sort of healthcare delivery system, for instance, is this ensuring a sort of dollar sort of equitable, dollar-for-dollar equitable sort of funding rate for healthcare, or is this committing us all to a system in which you've got bureaucratic inefficiencies and overall
we don't have bureaucratic inefficiencies now.
But my only, we absolutely do. But my only point here, Dominique, is just to say that the impulse towards a way of looking at societies that is sort of rooted in freedom of choice in the marketplace, but rooted in economic self-sufficiency contained within the community based on a foundational sort of traditional cultural values. That's a very real tradition in the Black community. And you're absolutely right. Some people, Black people who you would identify as conservatives in this way are Republicans and others are Democrats. So it's not necessarily a strictly party sort of thing, right?
And
so
Kwamel's in the chat saying, remember, everyone, party and ideology are not the same thing.
And that is also true. Now, that's less, Kwamel's right, although it's interesting because that was less true. That has been less true since sort of the 1970s or so in American politics, where conservatives, broadly speaking, have coalesced behind the Republican Party and liberals and progressives more broadly around the Democratic Party. Before that, of course, you had liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats, and you had heterodoxy in both parties. We may be moving towards some version of that again, because conservatism, from what I can see in its traditional value set, it's still sort of there in the GOP, but it's been overwhelmed by this sort of Trump nationalism, Trump populism.
I mean, let's call it what it is. It's fascism. It's
but
authoritarian fascism. Because the definition...
There are a number of Democrats who have moved into that camp as well.
Okay, we can talk about that when we come forward, but not to skip over the point of fascism, because it is kind of a big... It is kind of a big deal.
Much more over to the Democratic side. So I'm just saying the
John
categories
Jr.,
are being scrambled.
the definition, one of the foundational definitions of fascism is the merger of the corporation and the state. And nothing embodies that more than Elon Musk and his little Nazi symbol and his, what I call the Department of Grifters for Elon taking over like government systems on behalf of a man who still runs 3 huge corporations that do business with the government. That is the merger of state and corporate oligarchs, and that is fascism, definitionally. I'll get your response. I can't wait to hear it when we come forward. John Wood Jr., Dominique DiPrima, KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I have a dream today.
From slavery and segregation to the Great Migration to our present-day rising, the Black experience in America is a story of resilience, achievement, and unstoppable spirit. This February, we're curating amazing conversations celebrating the heroes, the pioneers, and the everyday people who made history. Black History Month on KBLA Talk 1580. Together, we carry the torch forward.
It's a classic odor tale. You fried fish for dinner, cleaned up, but the smell is still in the house. And the neighbors are coming over for game night. They're on their way. And then you spray Febreze Air Mist. Febreze Air starts working instantly to fight even your toughest odors, so you go from fish to fresh like that. Now all you have to worry about is Pam cheating at charades.
Breathe happy, Febreze, la 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 la.
1 in 3 children born today will get diabetes. This sad prediction by the Centers for Disease Control will come true if millions of Americans don't improve their lifestyles, especially by changing what they eat, how much they eat, and how active they are every day. Every 23 seconds, another American gets diabetes. Stop diabetes before it starts. To learn more, contact the American Diabetes Association or download our free diabetes education programs at learningaboutdiabetes.org.
KBLA Talk 1580 stands with you, neighbor to neighbor, bringing you resources and what you need to know. For information on fire recovery resources, recovery hubs, and available services, call 211 for the City of Los Angeles and 311 countywide. Aid distribution locations, repopulation updates, and safety rules are constantly changing. Visit the LA City and LA County websites for the latest. If you'd like to sign up for the county's free debris removal, fill out a right of entry form, or get a list of disaster recovery centers that are still active, please visit recovery.lacounty.gov or call the debris hotline at 844-347-3332. If you're vulnerable to mudslides with rain in the forecast, free sandbags are being offered. Go to lacounty.pw/sandbags to find out where to get them. Businesses who have lost their facilities due to the fires can use a regional online source to get free or discounted locations. Whether you're interested in donating or finding space, you can visit the Business to Business Space Share portal at spaceshare.lacounty.gov. Additional LA County small business support and programs can be found at opportunity.lacounty.gov. Praying, advocating, and standing with you. KBLA Talk 1580.
It's KBLA Talk 1580's third annual Black History Month luncheon, and you're invited. This is year 2 of our climate justice work, and this year's $2 million 12-month campaign is all about linking and combating the relationship between climate and Black health. We already know that these wildfires will leave in their wake even greater inequities, including negative impacts on Black health, given the toxic air pollutants circulating in the air we breathe. So, as part of this year's climate campaign, we're honoring Black doctors and leaders in healthcare at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Friday, February 28th at noon. If you would like to join us, just go to our KBLA 1580 website and register for your chance to be our guest at the luncheon. We'd love to see you. And in case you haven't heard the news, KBLA Talk 1580 was just named one of the semifinalists for the American Climate Leadership Awards 2025. Caring about the climate, caring about the community, changing the conversation. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down. The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
John Wood Jr. is my guest. Before you respond to the question about whether we are currently a fascist government experiencing a coup, an authoritarian coup, I have to say that John is currently modeling what his organization, Braver Angels, does, which is bring some, decency back to discourse. And many Republicans that I talk to on this show, there ends up being yelling and people insulting me and stuff. You and I can can disagree without disrespect, and that's really what one of the things that your organization teaches.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's right. That's right. Of course, Braver Angels, largest grassroots cross-partisan organization in America, focusing in on exactly that, rehabilitating the discourse, and actually making it possible for people to organize together in institutions and on issues across our disagreements on these issues, whether we be black or white, left or right, and what have you. And of course, Dominique, you and I we've been having these conversations for
many years. Yeah, since Front Page. Yeah,
that time has gone by really quickly too, right? So we're in a little bit of a rhythm at this point. But even in the beginning, I feel like from day one, you and I were able to engage in this way.
Yeah, see, I don't mind letting people make points that I disagree with. What you don't get to do is come on my show and disrespect me.
Well, right.
And that's what, the mansplaining and the sort of talking down, that doesn't work because, I've been on this mic for a long time for a reason. But I bring that up, and I don't want to lose our flow here, but it must be, how long have you been in Braver Angels?
8 years.
So maybe you did see it coming. I mean, the point where we are right now with the discourse, where even people in Congress act like they're at a baseball game. Yeah, right. If you, I'll beat your butt. I mean, can we return from that? I mean, is this where we are permanently now?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, not to be melodramatic, but that's the way it got to be in the run up to the Civil War, where famously, of course, abolitionist Senator Charles Sumner was beat by a Confederate senator, or a would-be Confederate senator on the floor of the Capitol building with a cane, and after that happened, people from around the South mailed fresh canes to that Confederate congressperson to cheer on his brutality. So, there is a spiral down.
There's a precedent. There's a precedent for our demise.
There's a precedent. There is a precedent for that. But that's just to say that, having learned, from history, of being a student of history, right, ought to give us a sort of a window into the signs we ought to be wary of. And
are we headed for another civil war?
See, here's the thing. I mean, again, I don't want to be alarmist or melodramatic. On the other hand, you have to be realistic and understand that the water's going to flow in one direction or another. The one thing that is not going to happen is that we are just going to stay at a status quo where we're increasingly dishonest to each other, we're increasingly hostile with each other, and not face consequences for that in terms of the right. We are either going to pull it back and find our way towards some higher ground in how we deal with each other in politics, and restore the integrity of our institutions as well as our interpersonal relationships, or we are going to careen in a direction of some kind of violence.
Well, I mean, we're careening, and we had some kind of violence.
Yeah, exactly.
January 6th. It's just how much does it escalate?
Mm-hmm.
Molly Bell wants to know, John Wood, have you always been a Republican? What turned you? Was it something Democrats did? She says, he's handsome. My best comment. He came home.
I appreciate it. No, I wasn't always Republican. I grew up thinking myself as a liberal Democrat. Now, as a matter of fact, my first political address I gave at the Culver City Council meeting where we passed a resolution opposing the Iraq War. I was 15 years old, and I think this was 2002 or something like that.
That's hilarious. Do you have it on tape? No, we didn't have phones.
Actually, it's up on YouTube.
Is it really?
If you type in
my
young
goodness.
John Wood Jr.,
okay, I will do so.
My voice is like an octave higher.
Well, that happens. Yeah, wow.
A couple of things happened simultaneously. So, look, I was jaded about American politics after George W. Bush was reelected in 2004. I was 5 days too young to vote, but I was very much active campaigning for John Kerry in that election cycle. And after that, I just sort of felt like the political system did not work and so forth.
You sound like Tim Walz right now.
Yeah. But in retrospect, how spoiled was I, right? I'm 17 years old. I lose one election and I'm like, I don't want to play anymore, right? So I don't say it like it's something I'm proud of or anything like that. But when Barack Obama came along, I was very much inspired to get involved again because I related to Obama both biographically but also philosophically because I felt that Obama, coming from, racial differences and this background he came from, was really seeking to build a bridge of goodwill across America that to me echoed with King's sort of vision of the beloved community. I just saw a lot of myself in him and his campaign. I believed in him, and so I started working for his campaign. And as a part of that, I really had a deep focus on wanting to sort of appeal to Republicans and conservatives to be a part of that social change, right? And so after Obama was elected, I took it on myself to really start studying conservatism and also African American history from a more conservative perspective. And the long story short of that is that I kind of wound up converting myself philosophically. I realized at a certain point that there are a lot of things that, upon reflection, I kind of agreed with in a larger sort of conservative worldview, but particularly when I looked at Black history from a more conservative vantage point. Obviously, that's tempting a bigger conversation, Dominique. I completely want to jump in. But the one other thing I would say to that is that I did experience, I met a woman from a traditionally sort of Black Baptist background in Los Angeles when I was doing fundraising for the Democratic Party. And at the time, I was very much sort of anti-organized religion. I felt myself having a somewhat anti-Christian disposition from really more of a secular humanist kind of vantage point. And I remember I had this sort of clash with this person. And I said something condescending in retrospect. I said, how can you, being as smart as you are, believe in this book with all of its fairy tales and superstitions? If God is real, he can't be about bigotry, he can't be about xenophobia, he can't be about sexism and all these laws and restrictions. If God is real, he's got to be about love and enlightenment and higher vibrations. God has got to be about love. And she said, that's right. For though I speak with the tongue of men and of angels, if I have not love, I have become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. If I have faith to understand all mysteries, and faith to move mountains, and knowledge to understand all mysteries, if I have not love, it profits me nothing. If I give my goods to feed the poor, and my body to be burned, if I have not love, I am nothing. And I listened to that. I said, wow, that's beautiful. Did you write that? And she was like, no, fool, that's 1 Corinthians. Anyway, I wound up marrying that woman and having 3 kids with her, but that set me on a sort of a journey where I kind of went from verse 1, chapter 1, Genesis to the end of Revelation, came out the other end of it a Christian, but also having a renewed appreciation for the role of the black church in the black community, which was something that I really didn't have a relationship to in a very particular way growing up. And so that was also a part of a larger kind of shift.
So the church gained you, but the movement lost you. We'll put it that way.
But I tell people, because you hear all these leaving the left stories from people who've gone to the right in more recent years. I tell people I did not have an ugly divorce with liberalism, right? Like I actually still am, there are still some foundational ways in which, in a larger sense, I'm liberal in my sort of dispositions,
I haven't found those yet, but I do think that that's an interesting point, because a lot of the folks that end up on, yelling and acting up on this show, one of the things I want to ask them is like, who hurt you? Like, why are you so angry? You should be over here happy about whatever that talking point that you're, so faithfully repeating. And rather than like, just angry. But I do think there is a perception, and we're going to have to get to the fascism question after news, traffic, and sports, because we only have
talk about
40 seconds here. But I do think that there is a way in which a lot of black Republicans, now I'm not talking about conservative, I'm talking about Republicans, do not have a relationship with the black community in general. It may be their little church that they can deal with, or it may be their group of other Republican sycophants that they deal with. They don't, generally, you don't see black Republicans marrying black women. You don't see them working at black radio stations. And so maybe that's where the part about not having an ugly divorce comes into play. We're talking with John Wood Jr. You can hear him Sundays on this radio station at 9 a.m. He's got his own show, but right now he's here with me on KBLA Talk 1580.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to gear with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know with BIN News. The U.S. has started deporting African and Asian migrants to Panama. On February 12th, a U.S. military flight deported migrants from Afghanistan, China, India, Iran, and Uzbekistan. Another flight on February 13th included migrants from Cameroon. A bill proposed by New York Representative Claudia Tenney seeks to make Donald Trump's birthday and Flag Day a federal holiday. Tenney argues that Trump, as both 45th and 47th president, has had a significant impact on the nation. The Washington Post declined to run a $115,000 ad by Common Cause urging Trump to fire Elon Musk, raising questions about political influence. And the University of Connecticut installed vending machines with Plan B to increase contraception access at a lower cost. UConn also launched a program to train pharmacists to prescribe birth control following a 2023 law expanding contraception access in the state. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
If you or someone you know is affected by the Los Angeles wildfires, you are not alone. No matter how sad, scared, or heartbroken you feel, CalHope is here for you and all those affected by the devastating wildfires. Find free, safe, and confidential mental health support at calhope.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Former Crenshaw High School star Marcus Johnson is a finalist for the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, class of 2025. Johnson, an All-American at UCLA, played 7 of his 11 NBA seasons with the Milwaukee Bucks. He was a 4-time NBA All-Star and a first-team All-NBA selection in 1979. Former Lakers center Dwight Howard and Carmelo Anthony are also among the finalists. The Hall of Fame inductees will be chosen April 5th during the NCAA Final Four in San Antonio. 46 players from HBCU schools participated Monday in the NFL's HBCU Scouting Combine in New Orleans. It was a chance for HBCU players to make a first-hand impression on NFL scouts and player personnel directors. 7 players from last year's HBCU Combine earned a roster spot on an NFL team, including Rams kick returner Xavier Smith of Florida A&M. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio that's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
I feel so alone.
I'm embarrassed to talk about it.
How can I help my kid if I can't help myself?
I can't remember when I wasn't stressed.
I don't like it inside.
When you feel overwhelmed by your thoughts and emotions, it's okay to get help. You are not alone. CalHope is here for you with free, safe, and confidential mental health resources for youth, young adults, families, and you. Find support now at calhope.org.
Hey, can you blow up some balloons for Jack's party?
I can't. I'm so congested.
You need Sinex Saline from Vicks.
Sinex Saline nasal spray?
Yeah, just Sinex. Breathe.
Sinex Saline instantly clears everyday congestion associated with colds and year-round allergies with a gentle, ultra-fine mist that's no mess and easy to control.
Daddy, we need more balloons.
On it.
Enjoy life's important moments without congestion. Try Sinex Saline from Vicks. Just Sinex. Breathe. Use as directed.
This is the story of the one who, as a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, knows that vintage charm historically needs constant attention. Which is why, when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million-plus products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them. The right tools and supplies are never far away. So the one can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
KBLA Talk 1580 stands with you, neighbor to neighbor, bringing you resources and what you need to know. For information on fire recovery resources, recovery hubs, and available services, call 211 for the City of Los Angeles and 311 countywide. Aid distribution locations, repopulation updates, and safety rules are constantly changing. Visit the LA City and LA County websites for the latest. If you'd like to sign up for the county's free debris removal, fill out a right of entry form, or get a list of disaster recovery centers that are still active, please visit recovery.lacounty.gov or call the debris hotline at 844-347-3332. If you're vulnerable to mudslides with rain in the forecast, free sandbags are being offered. Go to lacounty.pw/sandbags to find out where to get them. Businesses who have lost their facilities due to the fires can use a regional online source to get free or discounted locations. Whether you're interested in donating or finding space, you can visit the business-to-business Space Share portal at spaceshare.lacounty.gov. Additional LA County small business support and programs can be found at opportunity.lacounty.gov. Praying, advocating, and standing with you. KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate meets a scholarly match.
John Wood Jr. is my guest. Okay, I got other questions, and we over here having a different conversation. But John Wood Jr. is a KBLA host, the only one actually that's a Republican. The show is the Reconstruction Project with John Wood Jr. It is 9:00 Sunday mornings, before or after church for you. You go Dr. John, you do Dr. Sunshine, then you do John Wood Jr., then Justice Files with Dion Raymond, and then you go to church. Just go to a late service.
There you go.
So, is this fascism? Are we there now? Is it a coup? I mean, it feels like a coup. Some people apparently supposedly elected Donald Trump, but Elon Musk seems to be the puppet master.
Well, what it is at the very least is a wanton abuse of the Constitution, to be sure. Endorsed, I think, by a Republican Party and a conservative movement that has generally prided itself on being the guardians of the Constitution. And so this is happening on a number of different levels. I mean, on the one hand, there are the aggressive ways in which, President Trump, with Musk in tow, are unraveling whole government agencies that are approved and commissioned by Congress, whose funding have been mandated by Congress, right? And then there's sort of USAID is an example, and and then there's sort of the blasé way in which Republican congresspersons like Lindsey Graham and others are acknowledging the fact that the administration is in defiance of the law by at least not providing notification with respect to some of the executive decisions that they're taking to undo these agencies and so forth. And the response to that is that, okay, maybe it's illegal, but it shouldn't be illegal because this is the executive's prerogative, right? Except that it's not, because it's Congress's prerogative as established by the Constitution, right? And so the Congress, led by Republicans, is sort of rolling over in establishing itself in its constitutional prerogative as a check on executive authority. But then you also have President Trump just sort of seeking to kind of take his own executive pen to the Constitution and, rewriting the 14th Amendment.
Reminds me of what he did with that hurricane map. Just get out a Sharpie. And to be clear, John Wood Jr. did not vote for Trump. You actually voted for West.
I actually voted for our own Professor Cornel West.
Yeah. It's kind of a protest vote.
As a protest vote, but as an earnest endorsement of the character of Professor West and his immense contribution to American cultural, social, and intellectual and philosophical life over many decades. He's one of the most distinguished men of our time, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I was honored to vote for Cornel West.
Well, he thinks it's fascism.
Yeah, no, he does.
You don't concur?
I understand the point of view.
What is separating us from a fascist regime at this point? If you just outlined it, they're taking away the power of the purse from Congress by cutting expenditures that were already approved by Congress unilaterally, right? J.D. Vance is claiming, and Elon Musk is claiming, that the president is not bound to abide by the rulings of the courts, which actually that's kind of the whole system.
Right. Well,
so how is that, and consolidating all of this power, or trying to consolidate all this power in the executive branch, which is basically an authoritarian playbook. How is this not fascism, John?
Well, first of all, I would say that all things exist on a spectrum. And there, I think, is
a low spectrum fascism.
Well,
what are you saying?
Yeah. So if you want to define it as a low spectrum fascism,
a mild case of authoritarian oligarchy.
Yeah, you can look. You can look at
what the actual.
But you can look at the individual elements of what the Trump administration is doing and find precedent for different pieces of what they're doing in different parts of American history. It's not as if Trump is the first president to abuse the Constitution. It's not as if he's the first president to abuse executive orders. Actually, it was striking.
But does that make it okay?
No, it doesn't. But what I'm saying is that it was actually, just a little side point, it's actually striking and disappointing to me. But, Trump, there's no precedent for what Donald Trump tried to do with the 14th Amendment, except for Joe Biden trying to sort of executive fashion establish the Equal Rights Amendment as the law of the land on his way out the door. I think simply because he figured Trump was going to do something like that, and so he might as well beat him to the punch on the way out, right? But my only point is that people are not wrong to play up the danger of the moment. And by the way, I probably agree with a fair amount of the practical changes that Republicans want to see initiated.
The elimination of USAID?
I don't know if I want to see the elimination of USAID. I am skeptical about various individual projects within the scope of USAID.
But that's different than dismantling an agency.
It is.
People are actually, clinics have shut down. Right. The whole AIDS prevention. How are you?
Well, one of George W. Bush's greatest contributions,
absolutely,
of course, was the
one of the only
program,
decent things Republicans have done in the last
Africa.
20 years. Yeah.
That program was originally designed by a friend of mine, Rich Tafel, who founded the Log Cabin Republicans and built the early version of that program in consultation with the Congressional Black Caucus and Black ministers.
But
so
you can go into all this history, but you can't. You're saying practically you agree with a lot of these cuts.
Well,
cutting USAID, which I know it does have regime change as part of its back pocket, as part of its mission, but it also, you're like literally starving people. I call it, you broke it, you buy it.
Yeah,
we go in and we trash countries. We, bomb them. We regime change them. And then we at least provide some food, you know, and water and possibly medicine. I mean, the eradication of many diseases. How do you agree with that?
Yeah, well,
how do you agree with the dismantling of the
don't-
Consumer Protection Bureau?
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with dismantling the programs that you identified in USAID that are doing real and needed humanitarian work internationally, right? And so the thing is that, you know, we need, I think, a serious scalpel to cut into the areas. There's such a hackneyed phrase at this point, but waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, guess
Where?
what? That
How about we
that
cut
is-
some of those Elon Musk contracts? There goes some waste, fraud, and abuse.
But
I mean, what they're
I'm
cutting is not waste, fraud,
I'm
and
getting
abuse,
to your,
John.
But I'm getting to your point, Dominique, which is that even in agreeing with the idea that there are cuts and reductions. By the way, members of the Obama administration have come out and expressed regret over the fact that, you know, they feel that part of the opening Musk has here owes itself to the fact that there were sensible cuts that they should have been making to programs that
I get all that.
now are
but-
serving as an opening for that. But what I do not favor
But that's what
is
aboutism.
taking-
I mean,
allow-
that's
allow
both
me-
sides.
But allow me to say, Dominique, that what I do not favor is taking an unconstitutional wrecking ball to these problems that, in addition to breaking a lot of things that we should not see broken, manages to establish the executive office in a way that towers above its constitutionally mandated limitations,
i.e. a dictatorship.
And I do think that that's what we're veering towards. There's a right leaning.
Are we veering towards it, or are we already
or are we
there?
already there? Well, right.
Congress is standing by with no means to enforce their authority.
Yeah. Well, they do have the means. It's just that
What?
Republicans won't exercise.
What
them,
means do
right?
they have?
Well, I mean, Congress could assert itself with respect to the president's impact on individual government agencies by reminding the executive branch that these functions are congressionally mandated and that the executive does not desist in his extra constitutional.
Well,
sort of
Democrats
changing
are
these programs,
reminding the
that this
president
will
of that, and he
this will
doesn't
come
care.
before the courts, and that this will be a halt. But you need a congressional majority, I think, to really exert muscular influence here. In other words, Congress needs to stand
so you're saying
united.
Republicans would have to
Republicans don't want to challenge.
would have to
don't
take
want
their
to challenge
responsibility as the
President
check
Trump.
part of checks
Exactly,
and balances,
exactly,
which they're not even remotely lining up to do.
Well,
they act
that
like a
is-
bunch of scared little.
Well, I mean,
things I can't say on the
Donald
radio.
Trump thoroughly dominates the Republican Party, you know, it was striking to me. I mean, I was listening to a conservative talk show host and former Deputy Attorney General Mark Levin, if you're familiar with Mark
Yes.
Levin. And I've been
Why would
listening
you
to
want to
I've
listen to
been-
that?
Well, I've been listening to Mark Levin for years and years. You know, my dad is a conservative, right? And a Trump supporter. My dad is very, you know, big fan of Levin's. I've been listening to Levin for years and years. But what's funny about it is that he is an individual. He is a man who has helped forge the self-identity of the conservative movement for many years. And part of that has been that he's always been a free trader, right? And then he made an argument the other day in a video that you can find where he describes Donald Trump as the most constitutionally conservative president in the history of the United States of America. And he hits the trade issue, right? And again, this person has been free trade for decades and decades and decades, and has criticized Democrats and Bernie Sanders for tariffs, for protectionism, so on and so forth. And then he says, I didn't know this until recently, but if you look back at the last years of the Reagan administration, it looks like Reagan put in place some tariffs and some protectionist policies. And so Reagan conservative, Trump conservative. And I thought, well, you know, that's interesting. So you're telling me that conservatism is dependent not on the objective substance or merits of its ideas, of its ideology, but more on who the person is who is enacting them. He talked about how Trump is cutting taxes by expanding the child family
taxes
tax
for who?
credits, right? Well, actually, it's interesting because he's talked about all the different rate cuts and so on and so forth. But part of what he gives Trump credit for are tax cuts through tax credits to working families. Now, that's actually something Trump's doing that people listening here may agree with. But I'm old enough to remember.
That he claims he's going to
do. But
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember when Mark Levin himself and just about every other major conservative commentator were bashing Barack Obama for the stimulus package, a third of which were what Obama referred to as tax cuts, and they were largely tax credits to working families. But because
you
it's
don't
a
have to
credit
go
and
back
an
that far.
expenditure,
You can go back.
They say this is government spending if it's Obama, but it's a cut. if it's
Yeah,
Trump.
I mean, but you don't have to go back that far. You can go back to 2023 when they refused to re-up the child tax credit, which took, 4 million American children out of poverty and starvation.
Yeah.
They didn't want to do that. Now they're trying to do maybe going to do a version of it under Trump. We shall see. We're talking with John Wood Jr. Still haven't answered the question, but maybe we'll take another shot at it when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I started vaping my freshman year of high school, mostly because all my friends had vapes. I wanted to fit in with them and look cool and be a part of everything that they were doing. The hardest part about quitting for me was all my friends still hitting their vapes right next to me. It was really frustrating and confusing when I was trying to quit because in my head I knew I didn't want to do it anymore, but for some reason my brain still wanted it.
No quit story is the same. For free support, text Kick Nicotine to 66819 today.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though.
Lena Bloom for the Bail Project. Imagine you're stuck in a jail cell and you can't afford bail and someone offers you a way out. Just plead guilty and you can go home and kiss your kids goodnight. What do? What thousands have. You plead guilty whether you are or not. Cash bail makes poverty a crime. That's why the Bail Project helps those who can't afford it while fighting to end cash bail. Because freedom should be free.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Febreze.
So my home is also my office. And before I can focus, every room's gotta be clean. That means tidying up, then spraying my Febreze Air Mist. Ooh, that's fresh. Febreze Air Mist scents are all high quality. They fight any weird funk, and they give my air an instant boost of freshness. So not only does my home smell good, I feel good too. After I Febreze, it's time to start my day.
Breathe happy, Febreze, la 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 la.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. If you need help getting your resume in order, finding job training, or landing a job, we've got 3 great options for you. First, the City of Los Angeles has WorkSource centers across the area offering free job support. The California Workforce Development Board can help you with everything from GED prep to vocational training at no cost to you. On the federal level, the Department of Labor's American Job Centers offer a full range of services for job seekers and businesses alike. Visit careeronestop.org, or for more info, just call California's Help Center or visit cwdb.ca.gov or call 916-657-1440. For the City of Los Angeles programs, go to ewdd.lacity.gov or call 213-744-7300. All these services are free to help you get your next job. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
You got a big mouth. Hello, Joe, you're up. Welcome.
We're unapologetically progressive, and we don't black down.
Okay, they're beating you up in the chat here, John Wood Jr. Honey Brown says, no, Dominique, he answered the question. He doesn't think we are under a fascist regime, so it's clear where he stands. His word salad isn't going to change any of that.
Well, let me address that. So first of all, let me say, I spent many years studying Nazi Germany. It was actually the first subject that I really kind of deeply applied myself to as a historical study. Interestingly, what you had in Nazi Germany was a situation in which the corporations had allegiance to the party which controlled the state, right? And of course, there is no sort of constitutional checks or balances in the case of Nazi Germany, but free speech was shut down. the rights of individuals and minorities obviously were circumscribed and eradicated. And you had a system in which there was no recognized authority other than the chief executive.
I mean, but the Nazis are not the Nazi Germany is not the only example of fascism.
No, it's not the only
example
example of fascism. The reason I try to be careful with the language of fascism, though, is because that's the example people tend to go to.
But it's a system of government. I mean, is Poland fascist?
Nazi example. I can speak with expertise on Poland. You probably know more about Poland than I do in the present moment. But my only point is that we are heading in this sort of direction if current trends hold. So I do want to validate the concern of the person who's bashing me in the in the chat and so forth. I just, because I work in an area where I'm trying to get people to sort of hear what the arguments are on all sides clearly. Because, conservatives have long been arguing that there is sort of a fascistic culture sort of creeping up, on the left. And now they're responding with their own sort of
but that's
like
just hysteria.
culture.
There is no
But we would have to have that conversation in some detail to understand.
There is no world in which the left is merging the state with the corporate.
If you're going to make the argument
that is strictly a right wing, there is no world in which the left is merging the corporate machine with the apparatus of the state.
Yeah.
We're not the ones who passed Citizens United. We're not the ones that let the Department of Grifters for Elon.
Who supported.
They're not. They're right-wing Democrats. Then, I mean, the
and
fact
the
of the matter is
sort of oligarchical
that's just hysteria. That's wham. We don't want to call people
real.
by their pronouns, so you're fascist. We don't want to respect people, so you're fascist. There's a definition of fascism. It's not just like you're an a-hole, which could be defined in many different ways.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, and as a technical matter, we have not come to the place where, strictly speaking, the state and the corporate, where your ability to operate in a corporate context is dependent upon your party allegiance.
Okay,
but we are on a path where these problems are getting more and more real as we allow the Constitution to be assaulted. And what I want conservatives to stand on are their constitutional principles, are on the fidelity that we are supposed to have to the checks and balances and the separation of powers that are mandated in the Constitution. Because if we do not stand up for those principles, we invite an authoritarian executive that does deliver us to a place to where the fascist charge has credibility, right? I'm on a progressive show right now talking to you, Dominique, but in my career, I'm speaking to Republicans and conservatives as much as I'm speaking to liberals and Democrats.
Okay, well, let me just pivot here because we only have a couple minutes left. Clearly, there's a huge attack on blackness. The DEI has become a synonym for the N-word. The fact that they're putting under DEI, black studies, themed dorms, all that kind of stuff. Clearly, it's an attack on blackness. And now you see Elon Musk and Donald Trump inviting white South Africans to come here because they're supposedly being persecuted by the black post-apartheid government, which still, by the way, has returned zero land to black South Africans, zero resources, because Nelson Mandela decided to do truth and reconciliation rather than 40 acres and a mule, and the younger generation is kind of fed up with it. But white people still control everything. All the land, the money. You just came from South Africa.
I did.
So how do you receive that in the midst of this anti-blackness coming from the new conservative, the new Confederate MAGA Republican Party, of which you are still a member? How do you receive them inviting white South Africans here as refugees while kicking out Haitians and all these other folks where we broke it and now we don't want to buy it?
I mean, it does seem like a way of signaling solidarity with the idea that white people are being persecuted here in America and in Europe and in South Africa as well, in the advance of sort of a global woke sort of regime. I do think it fits that pattern. I just had a beautiful trip to South Africa,
yes.
and that trip was not particularly focused on politics. I did have a conversation with with a more sort of religiously conservative-leaning Afrikaner couple. And I asked him about the sort of question, like sort of are white Afrikaners being sort of persecuted in South Africa today? And they disagreed with that, although what they did say was that they felt that the government was not providing security and protection to white farmers who, in many cases, have had their farms sort of invaded by people.
Okay, but here's the thing: you own all the industry, you own all the land. You never had to give back anything you stole, including all the wealth from all the labor that you stole. Provide your own effing security. How about that? How about that?
I think that all, but you can't complain about fascism on the one hand, Dominique, and then suggest that people don't have a right to the protection of the rule of law.
No, I can.
They do have a right to
no, they don't have a right to that. Well, then what happened to the protection of black people in America? That was one of the failures of the Reconstruction.
You cannot get into a way of thinking where we say that because one side does not respect humanity and the rule of law, that you're suddenly allowed.
No, I'm not saying that I don't respect the rule of law. I'm saying you own all the resources of the country.
In the first place.
I'm saying you have all the resources of the country, many of which you stole, most of which you stole. So pay for your own security. Do not expect the taxation on the mass number of poor people who never got their 40 acres and a mule to protect you and your white privilege. That's not me saying they don't have rights. It's me saying they need to go ahead and pay for their own security.
I mean, as a practical matter, that might be advisable, but I think I disagree with the idea that the government doesn't have an obligation.
So the government needs to protect the white farmers above. Did you go to
protect everybody?
Did you go to Joburg? Did you go to the slums?
I didn't go to the slums in Johannesburg.
Well, maybe next trip.
I was mostly, I would like to. I mean, I was mostly in the countryside. We went up north.
I think if you went to the slums, you would understand why I say that the people of South Africa do not owe those white farmers security until they can build housing to the refugees and descendants of apartheid wage slavery.
I think that's introducing a zero-sum dynamic when it doesn't need to be there. And the problem with that in any context is that it ensures that there will not be sort of consensus around the reasonable reforms and redistributions that need to take place in order to allow poor people.
Okay. Well, I was there the year before last. And the way that, I had the chance to talk to or interact with a lot of white South Africans.
Yeah.
And the way that they treat black people when no one is looking is worse than Jim Crow.
Yeah. No, look, I'm not denying what you observed by any means, Dominique. And of course, you've got more experience in the country than I have. I'm just saying that from the level of principle, people have a right to expect security from their government. That does not invalidate the idea. Well, of course, it does not invalidate the idea that we need to make up for past wrongs.
I think that means you should be spending all your time on reparations, because that was one of the things that black people in this country never received. Okay, we're going to have to do it again. We're out of time. You're going to have to tune in Sundays at 9 a.m.
Leave them wanting more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how we do it. John Wood Jr., thank you so much, as always, for the conversation on this Talking Point Tuesday.
Thank you, Dominique.
Phone lines are open after news, traffic, and sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know with BIN News. The U.S. has started deporting African and Asian migrants to Panama. On February 12th, a U.S. military flight deported migrants from Afghanistan, China, India, Iran, and Uzbekistan. Another flight on February 13th included migrants from Cameroon. A bill proposed by New York Representative Claudia Tenney seeks to make Donald Trump's birthday and Flag Day a federal holiday. Tenney argues that Trump, as both 45th and 47th president, has had a significant impact on the nation. The Washington Post declined to run a 150